I'd like to call this March 4th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Tonight on the agenda, we have one public hearing, one letter of recommendation, two information reports, and the removal of two items from the not ready for action items. Can I get a roll call of commission members, please?
Commissioner Helfrey.
Here.
Commissioner Rubis. Here. Commissioner Cohn. Commissioner Broyles.
Here.
Commissioner Clayton. Here. Commissioner Depler. Commissioner Jackson. Chair Beatty.
Here.
Councilmember Brost. And Mayor Boland.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, let's hear. Can I get an approval of the minutes from March 5th or February 5th, please? Motion by Commissioner Helfrey.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, second by Commissioner Clayton. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. Does the Department of Planning have any opening comments?
No, sir, but thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Let's hear. So this time we'll open the public comment session. If you want to speak on the public hearing, now is not the time, but if you want to speak on any of the other items on the agenda, now is the time to speak. And as a reminder, 3 minutes per speaker. So Mr. Newberry, do you have any cards?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. The first speaker is Ms. Link, followed by Mr. Bean.
I'm Lynn Link and I live at 4028 Indian Ridge. And I'm talking on PZ 124. We've all heard the recent news that the National Institutes of Health, National Heart and Lung and Blood Institute found, quote, daily use of cannabis predominantly through smoking was associated with a 25% increased likelihood of heart attack and a 42% increased likelihood of stroke when compared to non-use of the drug. Additionally, all the added rules created for recreational marijuana facilities will require policing for compliance and enforcement. The cost to do this could substantially outweigh any anticipated increased revenue. The residents of the city of De Pere will be voting in November, as Missouri state law allows, whether or not to ban recreational pot sales, and perhaps we should allow our citizens this opportunity too. In addition, planning and zoning is tasked with limiting large corporations who would put profits over our safety and making sure developers abide by building safety codes. Last month, when discussing the placement of cell towers off Highway T, I brought up numerous studies from the NIH Library of Medicine linking adverse health risk to cell tower exposures. It was actually reassuring to see the shock and concern on faces of some of the commissioners when the city attorney essentially said you should not discuss possible adverse health effects on our citizens. It reassured me that most of you who serve our municipality are mindful of the effects of your decisions and what they will have and the effect on our lives. None of you should ever be put in a position where you're told that you must completely ignore medical data linking health risks to the citizens you represent. In 2014, Governor Nixon signed SB 650 into law, which gave broadband and wireless service providers new powers while essentially taking away rights of municipalities to deny those companies from building towers in their borders. Since 2014, countless studies have linked adverse health effects to cell tower exposures. Thankfully, there are still some powers that municipalities have with regard to cell towers. Physicians for Safe Technology and the Environmental Health Trust are nonprofit organizations which have done extensive research into adverse health effects of cell towers. They've come up with common sense solutions, and I have the information here, and they're just common sense codes and things that municipalities can enforce to mitigate some of the health effects. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
And to whom do I give this? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker is Mr. Bean, followed by Mr. Duckett.
Good evening, Russell Bean, Selective Solutions. We are a site acquisition firm hired by Ameren to help zone and permit their proposed LTE towers. I'm here to ask tonight, we've met with the city, we've relocated our tower to a spot less visible. We've provided some photo simulations, which I hope got to everybody. And tonight I would respectfully request that you approve us with our design as proposed, with the condition that we obtain a variance for our tower setbacks and our fence type. And that's my request this evening, respectfully. And thank you for all being here and allowing me this time.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
comments.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker is Mr. Duckett, followed by Ms. Vedvig.
Hi.
My name is Chris Duckett and I live at 17062 Fireglow Drive. And I'm speaking on PZ 26, 27, and 28, the Fisher and Frickle new development. And I feel that the development that they proposed, the density is too dense for that small of an area. There's way too small for what they propose. You're going to lose too much green space for our area. Traffic on Taylor Road will increase proportionately, and they already speed through there with no change at all. And if you put that much more in there, it's just and you're going to widen the road to do that. So the speeding is going to pick up. I realize that we want to put more families in Wildwood, but I think if you wanted to change the zoning, maybe make it less dense than what they propose. They propose 34 in there. I would think even half of that would be better. And also I live in a Fisher and Frickle development, and I've looked at their plans, and they have some common ground, just like they planned in our subdivision. I would recommend to the zoning commission that they get a better definition of what they're going to do with that common ground, and not just, oh, this is common ground, we're going to develop it. Make them show you what they're going to do as far as I would say the number of trees, the type of trees, all that, because with ours, it was, oh yeah, we're going to do something. And by the time it got to the end, all they did was lay down some of that stuff that the grass grows out of. And that was the extent of it. And so that really is, that was a detriment for us. And also I would hopefully maybe put in another traffic circle on Taylor to slow it down. I know the ones that they put in our subdivision helps tremendously, the bumps and the circles. And that's all I really had to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker is Ms. Vedvig, followed by Mr. Dieters.
I have some questions still from the February 5th
Name
meeting.
and address, please.
Jean Vedvig, 16709 Clayton Road, Wildwood, Missouri, 63011. So, the Solus thing got shuffled off to the council, and I had asked some questions and I didn't get any answers yet. And I was thinking that Mr. Beatty might want to try and answer some of those. After the last meetings, what are the steps and the process for the following meetings? How does one pay $920,000 for a property to do some sort of a commercial activity without any approval from the city? How does that happen? So it's been suggested that there is work being done in the greenhouse. And new owners conduct business without a license in a rural residential area. I mean, this is a residential zoning. They're not far nursery, so they're not grandfathered in. Can you explain how the request got this far without any kind of approval and them actually having activity on site. So if they're conducting business type activity, what will the city do? And again, because they're not doing retail, does this give so what permission does this give Solus to do? What kind of activities do they have permission to do? And why do they have permission, or do they have a business license? Does it include 24/7 operation? Is it retail?
1 minute.
And what defines a nursery? Do they need a permit? Who will do the enforcement action? What can the new guy grow in this greenhouse? What can they grow? And are they able to do retail, wholesale? What are they actually doing? And who in the city knows enough about this science to be able to actually test and police this effort? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
It's not, those are not comments, those are questions, and I'm hoping to get answers.
All right.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker is Mr. Dieters.
I'm Ron Dieters, 2737 Questover Canyon Drive. And I'm just kind of curious on this tower with these signs. It looks like it's like 40 feet around. I'm wondering, they say they're going to have radiation signs at the entrance. I'm wondering if they're going to have radiation signs all the way around, because I live adjacent to this, where this land is. It just seems kind of vague, and also placement of this whole proposal was put in the middle of a field that wasn't very accessible, as well as I never got a postcard on this in terms of the building or anything, or any of this information. That's my comment.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the department does not have any additional speaker cards, and there are a few on Zoom, but none have raised their hand.
All right. If anyone on Zoom would like to speak, now is the last chance. You need to fill out a speaker card if you want that. If you want to talk about the subdivision next to Brightleaf, now is the time. Yeah. The public hearing is just about the subdivision zoning changes.
Hi, I'm sorry for the confusion. It says accepted here excluding the public hearings advertised below, and below are these items. So therefore I thought there was a different
Only
time
the
to do
public,
this. You
this
understand?
is the public hearing. Name and address, please.
Says accept. Excluding. Okay, well, anyway, Paul Pullers, 2323 Sandalwood Creek Court. I live at Sandalwood Condos, 63038. I've been there since September of 1996. It was nice and quiet there when we started out. I knew they were going to be developing the area to our south. I knew that was going to happen, and I'm not trying to be an idiot. I know that triangle of land was, I think it's light commercial or something like that. I was told it could have been a veterinarian place or something like that. Someone's mentioning putting a Quick Trip, and you couldn't get to it anyway. I can't imagine having a Quick Trip. I'm one of the people who was at the meetings to fight having commercial on that side of 100, because I thought that's really kind of ridiculous, because if we can't keep all the commercial on the south side of 100 filled, why would we possibly want commercial on the north side? We want it all for residential. So I don't have a problem with that. I just think this is way too dense. I was out doing yard work yesterday for 5 hours, and there were horrible sirens. I mean, it went on and on and on. There were some of the sirens I didn't even understand what they were. I'd never heard sirens like that before. I spoke with someone else, Dennis Peterson, who lives in that bungalow on Taylor Road across from this project. And he said, I don't know what those sirens were either. I've never heard those either. So there's no sound absorbency. There's no sound baffled to kill enough sound, like there's so much noise from transportation at the intersection of 109, 100. There's no sound buffering, it's already horribly, horribly noisy. Now we're going to take out even more trees and put in more, hard surfaces which don't absorb anything. So I'm terribly concerned about the noise pollution. Also, I didn't realize until just now, I had been told what would be going in this triangle would be villas like across the street from it. Now I'm reading on the handout, it says up to 2 stories. Well, there's a big difference between the villas that are 1 story and 2 stories, because some of those buildings in Brightleaf, they're 2 stories, but then we have a 3rd floor below that, above that, and then we also have half a grade,
1 minute.
lower level below that. So it's almost, 3.5 stories high. Also, I think we need to be careful. We should note on some of those roundabouts, we have a couple of those buildings I just mentioned with the extra point on the top, and they're a dark gray, and we need to be careful too what colors are allowed, because it's a visual barrier. Not only is it tall, but it's more of an obstacle because it's a dark color. So I think that's another thing. Now, is what's supposed to go in this area? Is it only going to be like the villas across the street, or is it going to be taller, things like that? Because I was led to believe it was going to just be a continuation basically of the cottages, I think they originally called them, the least expensive things, the things closest to my complex. So I don't know what that is, but 2 stories, no, thank you. And I think it's definitely too dense. I think we need to keep more trees in there. We need more vegetation to block sound. And if anything, eventually we need sound barriers like they do along Route 4064.
That's your time.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the department's received a few more speakers.
Okay.
The next speaker is Mr. Schulte, followed by Mr. Gerler.
Good evening. I'm Brett Schulte. I'm talking about PZ 26, 27, and 28, which is the FNF proposal. I live at 17055 Fireglow Drive. Several things concern me with the development. It's going to increase the density of the population there that's already pretty dense in that area, as we've heard from a couple other speakers. The increased traffic and speeding of the vehicles on Taylor Road, especially given the other developments still pending for Wildwood. So I don't know what the other developments here in town center are going to do with the increased traffic on Taylor, but I think it's going to be used as a cut through. This is just going to increase that traffic flow. Given the current housing market and increased interest rates, my fear is that the customer base won't be there in the immediate future, and we will be looking at a barren property for quite some time if all the lots are ever sold. And given the close proximity to Highway 100 and 109, the traffic noise will keep potential buyers away, leaving unsold lots. The walking trail and noise levels will be negatively impacted by the lack of trees and vegetation around the area, which is something that Wildwood consistently talks about being a city of trees and vegetation. On the original print from FNF, there was a nice looking boulevard in this new development. The last print and the print today show that boulevard is no longer there. So there was a nice common ground in between the ingress and egress out of one of the areas. My concern is how many more of the plans are going to change to fit the rest of these 34 houses into this 8.1 acre lot. And finally, the FNF escrow needs to be retained until all open items are complete from the existing villages of Bright Lake. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker is Mr. Gerler.
Good evening, everybody. Speaking on PZ 1323, again, probably familiar with me talking about that, but we'll bring it up one more time. Really tonight, there was a couple of different issues with that. First would just be a call to the screening for that area. Again, going back to the elevation for that site. I know we've had different heights that have been mentioned, anywhere from a 6-foot privacy fence made out of vinyl material to a 7-foot fence that's in this material tonight to a 10-foot requirement that's made out of masonry or brick construction, I would just urge the board to consider making that requirement consistent with what we have with others in consideration of the height of the road to where the location of that pole would be constructed. If you're not familiar with the site, there's quite a bit of elevation change. So I'm not quite sure that even a 10-foot fence is going to create any type of visible obscurement of that facility. So it might just be something to take a closer look at to see what height would be needed if that is indeed the goal. The second thing that I would point out with that construction, as we've mentioned before, is just, again, its location and proximity given to the valley that it's in. Had another conversation with the folks over at Black and Veatch, and their explanation has been that unless there is a requirement due to density of population, that a construction permit to build a tower in a valley is rarely necessary. So again, given the size of Wildwood and how many vacant lots there are available, the choice of the location for Ameren, I think, is a little bit questionable at this time. The third thing that I would point out, and I pointed out in the October meeting that we talked about, and at least has now come to a little bit more light, is their anticipated use to rent this out to other cellular companies. Initially, that was stated that wasn't the case. Now, in some of the proposals, it says at least 2 other companies will be using that pole for those
1 minute.
purposes. Thank you. So again, just trying to understand what that end scope of this project will look like and what that tower by design looks like on this sheet of paper compared to its final use when other companies are also using it. And then the, excuse me, just one second here. The last thing that I wanted to mention with that too, unfortunately, I don't have the same level of generosity that Joe did at the last meeting, with the anticipation that we'll take Ameren's word for cleaning up the site. If any of you haven't been out to the site recently, there is still construction debris on that site, pretty visible from the street. If you would venture to walk the property, you'll find even more pieces that are there, ranging in length from 12 to 15-foot pieces of conduit to other construction material. And just to give us all an idea, the last laydown yard that was used there, where their new site
That's time.
is in St. Charles at a former dump site. So if you could imagine what they've left here, that might put it into perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the department has not received any speaker cards here in the room and no hands have been raised on Zoom.
All righty. This time we'll go ahead and go into our public hearing. In the city of Wildwood, public hearings are truly intended to accept comments and questions concerning this posted item. Since this request is being presented at a public hearing, no action is planned on this item tonight, and consideration of it is to be taken no earlier than the April 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. This approach ensures the members of the commission will hear all opinions before taking any action. The city's Department of Planning will address the comments, questions, and concerns that are raised tonight and include them as part of its formal recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Anyone in attendance at City Hall tonight wanting to speak should fill out a speaker's card and leave it with Mr. Newberry. Those in attendance via the Zoom webinar platform should use the raise hand feature to indicate you wish to speak at this hearing. A team member will add you to the list of speakers, which will then be communicated to me as chair, and I will invite you to speak when it is your turn. The public hearing process is outlined in the public hearings guideline pamphlet, which can be found on the table at the entry area to the council chambers. The commission will allow all parties adequate time to present their position. As outlined in the public hearing guidelines pamphlet, speakers who are designated as a group speaker representing more than 5 individuals will be allocated 5 minutes to speak. Those individuals representing themselves will be allocated 3 minutes to speak. In addition, information on this item can be found on the city's website at www.cityofwildwood.com. The commission would like to thank you for your cooperation and participation in tonight's hearing. All right, Mr. Vinich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as the primer describes, this particular item was before you approximately 2 years ago. During that 2-year period, there have been a number of other items that have come to the forefront, which required the department and this Planning and Zoning Commission to delay action. We are at a point now in 2024 where the department believes we can address these items that have been identified by the department and ultimately meet the work program requirement that has been part of the Planning and Zoning Commission's effort over the last couple of years. As you know, we have a work program that is typically adopted at the end of the calendar year and is used as a guide in the upcoming calendar year. In the original public hearing, the department identified a number of sections within the subdivision and development regulations that it believed should be reviewed or potentially considered. After reviewing those items again, the department has narrowed that list to a lesser number. That lesser number is identified on page 5 of the primer. Those items that have been identified are then given a short or brief description of why the department believes that it is imperative to consider these and any others that may be identified tonight at the public hearing by the commission members or those in attendance as the public. First and foremost, the intent is to create consistency across the suite of land use regulations the city of Wildwood has. And the first section is definitions. As you know, whenever we do new regulations as a community, the city of Wildwood, we ultimately have definitions to support those new regulations. And we want to ensure that there's consistency between the zoning ordinance, the grading code, the tree preservation and restoration code, and et cetera. One of the key ones the department would like to consider is our improvements installed and guaranteed, or a more concise term, our escrow process. As we are seeing, particularly in the rural areas of Wildwood, those zone NU non-urban resident district, some projects are taking in excess of a decade or more. That certainly stresses the escrow process from a standpoint of just ensuring that letters of credit, deposit agreements, commitments are met, but also from the resident standpoint that have bought into the project, the delays can sometimes become very onerous and expensive. And so from the department's perspective, it believes this is a key element of this discussion tonight. Skipping a few, we do want to address stormwater standards. Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District has upgraded their standards over the course of time. And as many of you know, the Watershed Erosion Task Force of this city has been looking at new regulations and new ways to treat stormwater on single lots to the largest subdivisions. So again, consistency there. Also, one of the areas that came out of our Watershed Erosion Task Force are easements for certain stormwater improvements. Oftentimes, when we, as the city, receive complaints regarding drainage or ponding water in a yard, ultimately a swale has been impacted by either its removal, its filling, or the placement of obstructions. So the idea here would be potentially to put swales and easements to protect them so they function, carry the runoff from storm events to the area inlets or the place of discharge or acceptance. Also, street lighting. The department again would note that with the advent of light emitting diodes, it is important that we keep pace with the changes in technology. And tonight, on a week from today, the city council will be taking up the issue of low voltage lighting, and that has recently been endorsed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. A couple of more points and then I will conclude. Landscaping, we have an update underway of our tree manual and sustainable planning's guide. We have a subcommittee of 3 city council members assisting the consultants. Obviously, we want to make sure we're consistent with what is the outcome of that effort on the part of Wildwood. And then finally, one of the items that years and years ago we didn't think much about, internet, we now think a lot about. So we'd like to add a new section for that purpose. These are the sections the department would like to explore. and bring back to the Planning and Zoning Commission for its consideration and action. If there are any questions regarding these that have been identified or any of the other sections in the subdivision and development regulations, the department would be glad to try and answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Mr. Newberry, do we have any speaker cards?
Mr. Chair, the department has not received any speaker cards. Again, give the prompt that if anybody on Zoom likes to speak to this issue, if they'd use the raise hand feature.
All right. Commissioner Helfrey?
Hi, Mr. Vunich. How are you?
I'm fine, ma'am. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. So the only thing that I would ask is that, earlier you said that we would be addressing the tree items, the tree manual in a future meeting. And I just want to make sure that when we address the subdivision rules, that we address street trees. And I personally, would like them to be called street trees so that people could look right at them and know. And I would like it to be in the subdivision thing that says what they're required and what species and placement and maintenance, because, I think that that's a pretty gray area right now, especially in my neighborhood, so I would like it addressed in the subdivision stuff if we could. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Newberry and I are aware of the email you sent regarding street trees. In the subdivision and development regulations, there is a section called landscaping, and it specifically identifies street trees. It's a subsection heading, and it gives very specifics about street trees. The specifics reflect more, I think, what we were doing years and years ago versus what we're doing now. And the direction I think the subcommittee of city council that's working on the tree manual and sustainable planning guide are working on. So definitely, I think you'll see that particular area of the subdivision and development regulations, landscaping with street trees, addressed, I think, to the satisfaction of this community.
Any more comments or questions from the commission? All right.
If there are no other comments or questions, the department would respectfully request a motion second and voice vote to close the public hearing. Thank you.
A motion to close the hearing.
All right, motion by Commissioner Clayton, second by Commissioner Helfrey. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, motion is closed. Thank you. Next on the agenda, let's see here. PZ 1-24.
PZ 1-24, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. The request for the consideration of amendments to Chapter 415 of the Code of Ordinances providing for regulations governing marijuana facilities within the City of Wildwood, all of which will be consistent with Article 14 of the Missouri Constitution. Any considerations regarding possible new regulations associated with these facilities would be premised upon City of Wildwood's protection of the public's health, safety, and general welfare through the application of its zoning and land use regulations in accordance with state statute and its charter, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vinich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as you may recall from our February meeting, a public hearing was held in regards to recreational marijuana and the components associated with it from cultivation to sale. At that time, when the public hearing concluded, the department respectfully requested the authorization to create the draft letter of recommendation for final action tonight. Certainly, if the Planning and Zoning Commission feels uncomfortable with proceeding forward, the department understands. But I can certainly guarantee you from the perspective of the department, with the assistance of Mr. Young and other attorneys at his firm, we have created what I believe is a very consistent and appropriate set of regulations to address recreational marijuana and the components associated with it. I think the bonus in this particular case is that the city attorney and the other attorneys working with him combine both medical and recreational marijuana so as there is a consistency and not two sets of regulations needed for the most part to govern what the voters of Missouri have bestowed upon municipal governments. just a few real quick facts. First and foremost, these were both constitutional amendments, so in many ways, the difficulty associated with the language is extreme. And again, I acknowledge Mr. Young and his team of attorneys for helping with that very much. Secondly, the medical marijuana ultimately was recommended to only occur 5 components: manufacturing, transportation, testing, cultivation, and sale in the Wildwood portion of the Chesterfield Valley. Again, our industrial area under the master plan and current zoning. Thirdly, that is the case here. The department, via the letter of recommendation in draft form, is recommending that recreational sale and all the components associated with that occur again in the Wildwood portion, the Chesterfield Valley. The Chesterfield Valley has many assets, obviously, from the standpoint of utility access, transportation network, available ground, and certainly with the city of Chesterfield, strong retail component now in association with former industrial and institutional type uses. Therefore, tonight before you is the recommended regulations for recreational marijuana and how it would be treated relative to land use decisions in the city of Wildwood. If there are any questions regarding the draft letter of recommendation, I certainly would defer to the city attorney tonight. If there are any questions about how the medical marijuana has been treated since we adopted the regulations for that, certainly Mr. Newberry and Ms. Ripito and I are available to address those. So tonight, the department is respectfully requesting a motion, second, and roll call vote to approve the regulations as submitted to you for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Mayor Bullen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just the bottom line, for the benefit of the public, is that issues relating to the sale, I guess, manufacturing, so forth, with recreational marijuana, as well as what we could use medical marijuana, would be only allowed in the industrial zone, which is near the airport in Chesterfield Valley. Just to be clear on that, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so with that, I make a motion to approve the regulations.
All right, motion by Mayor Bullen, Commissioner Helfrey, second. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubus.
Yeah.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Chair Beatty,
Yes,
and Mayor Boland.
Yes.
Thank you.
motion carries. Thank you. All right, PZ 13-23. Mr. Newberry?
PZ 13-23, Union Electric Company, EBA, Ameren, Missouri, 1901 Choteau Avenue, MC 700, St. Louis, Missouri 63103, care of Susan Story Selective Solutions LLC, 340 Marshall Road, Valley Park, Missouri 63088. A request for a conditional use permit, CUP, within the NU non-urban residence district for a 14.6 acre tract of land for which portion of this lot is to be utilized for a monopole type of telecommunication facility along with associated enclosed equipment area. This tract of land is generally located on the south side of St. Albans Road, State Route T, west of its intersection with State Route 100. Street address 18824 St. Albans Road, St. Louis County, locator number 24Y630140. Proposed use a 199-foot telecommunications tower and related equipment area. Again, the tower is proposed to be a monopole type with exterior antenna arrays. Ward 6.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich?
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department has prepared for your consideration tonight the third draft of its information report with recommendation. As is detailed on the front cover page of the information report, the department has had a recommendation prepared relative to this request since November of last year. At the latest meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on February 5th, the Planning and Zoning Commission requested an additional postponement to allow the petitioner, that being Ameren, Missouri, to provide renderings of the tower and equipment shelter area relative from all directions associated with the property, that being State Highway T to the east and to the west. The department did not require one to the south, given that it is property that is owned by Ameren, Missouri. There's a creek and then a steep hill that goes from there up in elevation substantially. The renderings were provided as part of tonight's packet. I do not know if they are agreeable to the Planning and Zoning Commission relative to what they depict in terms of allaying any fears or creating new. The department, again, has not altered its recommendation in this particular regard, and the recommendation is favorable. The favorable recommendation is premised on a number of items that are identified in the information report. I think it's key to note that, again, this particular area has had the transmission easement in location since the 1920s. That transmission easement includes high voltage wires and large tower structures. The intent of the department is to move the tower in closer proximity to those existing vertical improvements and lines so as to cluster them together as closely as possible and provide reasonable service from the tower for Ameren, Missouri, the petitioner, and a potential 2 co-locators. Co-location is a key component of the city of Wildwood relative to vertical improvements like towers. The more co-location opportunities that are available on towers that are either existing or to be approved means that there are less towers overall throughout the city in the future. The department, again, would note that the conditional use permit process limits the Planning and Zoning Commission and what it can do relative to setbacks and heights of fence. In this case, the proposed conditional use permit as presented to you tonight reflects the underlying requirements of the non-urban resident district and a 10-foot wall for screening purposes of the equipment shelter area. The department will conclude its presentation and prefer to take any questions relative to the renderings that have been provided and any of the conditions associated with the recommended tower as submitted tonight. Again, the department appreciates your attention during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vernich. Commissioner Helfrey?
Okay, Mr. Vernich, my first question is, did they clean up the property from all those times ago when we've asked them to clean it up? Is it cleaned up now? Because
the department, Mr. Newberry and I visited the location today just to kind of put eyes on it again. It is not finished. I will tell you first and foremost, the Board of Adjustment gave Ameren, Missouri till the end of March to complete the restoration. The rationale behind waiting till March was the assumption that through December, January, February, it would be hard to seed and get something in terms of ground cover established. What Mr. Newberry and I noticed was the conduit, the one speaker mentioned, they're broken pieces, they vary in size. There's still some rock left in one of the access areas, but all in all, they have roughly another 4 weeks to complete the restoration, and then it becomes an issue relative to the Board of Adjustments action and the city's enforcement.
Chairman.
Mayor Bullen?
Okay, so my point of order is it's actually going to be a question through Chair to the City Attorney. Is there any legal impediment if the commission chose to do it to delay action on this until the end of the Board of Adjustments deadline for cleanup at the end of March?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
well, that's gonna be my next question. So we can't ask them to postpone it? We can't postpone this until they get that part of it cleaned up? Because it seems to me they're asking us to let them do more when they haven't finished what we've asked them to do first. Am I incorrect in that?
They are two separate and distinct items that should be treated as such.
I
Okay,
have another point of order.
All right, Mayor Bullen?
My point of order would be through the Chair to the City Attorney, can this matter be postponed for other reasons?
It is inadvisable.
Thank you.
Ms. Helfrey, if I could just maybe one last thought on your first question before
Sure.
we move to the others. Obviously, when the department received a call from an individual in Questover Canyon relative to the condition of the property, a site visit was immediately made. And certainly we were surprised to see what we saw in terms of how Emma, Missouri had expanded its use from what was to be a temporary laydown yard as they replaced the high transmission towers within the easement itself. Obviously, we did our best to manage that, to eliminate that, and then return the property to a suitable condition, which in the case before all of this happened was an agricultural field for all intents and purposes. I don't know if that's Ameren, Missouri's plan. They do have to establish ground cover. There is a world of difference out there from what was there and is now. And I think 4 weeks is ample time to address any of the concerns that have been spoken about the condition of the property. If not, obviously, in 4 weeks, this will be back in the final draft form of a letter of recommendation. And if it's not done, the department will certainly advise you.
Okay, well, first of all, if I didn't pay my electric bill, I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't let me keep going like that, but that's a whole nother thing. My next thing is regarding the vinyl fence and the wall. I am not for a vinyl fence at all, because it seems to me that that is not any way secure at all. And I don't believe that the maintenance would be, well, I don't know that well, anyway, I don't think that the maintenance would probably be good on that. I think that the wall needs to be a wall. I think it needs to be for security and safety of the neighbors. And then just as a question, one of the things in here said that the antenna would be a minimum of 6 feet standing out. So what is the maximum amount of antennas they can put on this, and how far out can they actually stay from the pole? Because in here, it says that the minimum would be 6 feet from the pole. And I know that when this initially came to us, they said they were only going to use it for their own uses. Now they are going to be renting space on it. And so I'm just curious what it could possibly look like when it's all said and done for us.
There are many examples of telecommunications tower that have exterior antenna arrays. In the conditions associated with the department's recommendation, we say that shall be no more than 7.5 feet from the outside sheath or exterior of the tower to the edge of the external array or exterior array. So 7.5 feet is the maximum. I would suggest that at about 190 plus feet, it'll still look, to me, based upon what I've seen from other Ameren, Missouri facilities, somewhat small and not necessarily as intrusive as one might think. It's still a tower and it still has external arrays. So 7.5 feet is the maximum.
And my last thing that I'd like to address is the tree replacement. It says that there were going to be some trees removed, and I'm assuming that that will be addressed through our tree policy that we have in Wildwood, correct?
Yes, as part of the conditions in the report, we have requirements relating to landscaping and the installation of new landscaping in conjunction with the wall.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Mayor Bullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I just want to say for the benefit of those in the witness tonight, thank you all for being here, as well as anyone who may be watching. Not getting into too much detail, but the state legislature a few years ago passed a statute that significantly limits the ability of municipalities to really do anything with respect to powers of this nature. Despite however much the municipality may want to do it, it is simply not allowable under state law. And as you all probably know, state law trumps municipal law. And then just a side comment, kind of drilling down into this, Joe, and furthering Commissioner Helfrey's comment, for a variety of reasons, I don't think a vinyl fence would be appropriate here. Last, and this is, I guess, a question again to the city attorney. I would be interested to know, not as a requirement, because I understand that for applicable state law, we're not allowed to make this requirement, but we've had discussions previously with powers of this nature about some sort of disguise, so forth. And again, not as a requirement, but I would be interested to know, as a neighborly matter, if Ameren would be willing to look at, for example, maybe a different, well, actually two things. I remember a conversation we had with a water tower in our city back in about 2016, 2017. There are certain colors that eye does not pick up. And I think light grays, light blues versus a bright white, believe it or not, have an effect on that. And I understand that we may not be able to require it, but I would be interested to know whether, as a neighborly proposition, the city of company of Ameren would be willing to entertain the possibility of just on their own doing that for the benefit of our residents. So my question, with that in mind, without regard to cleanup, without regard to requiring it, is whether we could postpone this until the next meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to allow us to get an answer from Ameren as to that.
I would say that we still have to get a final recommendation by the next meeting.
Yes.
Final report. So my suggestion, consistent with my prior comment about postponement, is to proceed with that condition for the final report to come next month.
So the motion would be to proceed with the condition that I just indicated.
And members of the commission, that assumes that you accept the report as written with a favorable recommendation. Obviously, if there's a different approach, then that condition would not necessarily be needed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rubis? Do you have your mic on?
Can you hear me now? Okay. The mildew on vinyl fencing, and I don't foresee people coming out and cleaning the mildew up. I think once the fence is up, I would propose a wall, a concrete wall, and it could be decorative concrete like we have on the bridge over 109, over 100. And I think has to do with, they put that in when the wall's being poured, that it would be decorative, could look like brick, it could, whatever would be suitable to the department. But I think a wall, according to our recommendation, should be a wall.
And as the recommendation contains in the conditions, it is to be a masonry wall.
Okay.
And it's no less than 10 feet in height, but no greater in height than the equipment shelters it's intended to screen.
Commissioner Helfrich?
I just want to make sure that I understand that I have read this correctly. So if you wouldn't mind just helping me through this. For the first condition, they have to meet the setback. They have to go and handle the setback, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then under that same first thing, they are going to be removing some trees, but they will have a landscaping plan.
Correct.
Okay, and then the stuff in blue on the number 4 says the wall. That's where it addresses the wall. Is that correct? On page 10, number 4?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then number 5, or what does number 7? I guess my question is, would you explain that one to me? And then finally, number 3 says nothing. Okay, so the wall is addressed in number 4, and then the mayor has added also that we would like to ask them to possibly do a color that is that correct?
Yes, the condition reads now that it be a gray color,
Okay,
but certainly we've used other alternatives at other locations. And so the intent would be the department to contact the representative that spoke tonight, Mr. Bean, or the individual with Ameren, Missouri, and see if there's alternatives they've used elsewhere in the network. And if not, would they consider an alternative?
okay. Did I miss anything?
I believe not.
Okay,
Again, as best as I remember, we've addressed the exterior array and the distance from the base of the tower to its edge, and then the wall landscaping, co-location. So if there are other questions, certainly we'll do our best to answer them.
no, that's it, but I'm really shame on them for the trash. I mean, if the attorney hadn't told us that we could not postpone or would not be advisable, I would be saying postpone until the trash was cleaned up, so.
Well, as I say, we'll be back on April 1st, April Fool's Day. Hope I'm not the one that wears that crown, but we'll be back on April 1st and I'll have an update for you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich.
Volin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And one thing relative to the request that was approved by the Board of Adjustment, it does have an expiration date and there would be penalties and other acts the city could take if that isn't resolved. One question I have, Joe, before we finalize action on this is it your position as you stand here this evening that the most obscure location for this tower has been the discussions and the placement of the tower in terms of its obscurity, heightening its obscurity have been exhausted? This is the play. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rubis?
No less than 10 feet, but no greater in height than the shelter height that they're intended to screen. So the idea is the shelters are generally around 9 feet to 10 feet. And so the idea is to screen with the masonry wall so you don't see the shelter, which is, for all intents and purposes, a mechanical building. It has a number of appendages on the outside, et cetera. Well, again, I'm looking at the conditions itself. And what the petitioner proposed and what the department is recommending and what the code requires are two different things. But on page 13, item 2D, masonry wall at a height of no less than 10 feet or greater than the height of the equipment shelters or cabinets placed inside it. Thank you.
Any other questions or motion?
I do have one question for Mr. Young. Mr. Clayton has abstained on previous votes relative to this particular request because of his past employment by Ameren, Missouri. Tonight, we only need 5 votes to proceed forward, given that it's not the final action.
Correct.
Commissioner Helfrey?
So we have to have a vote to proceed. So, and I guess I'll make a motion to approve with those conditions and with the mayor's request that they consider the other color.
Motion by Commissioner Helfrey, seconded by Commissioner Rubis. Any other discussion? All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes. Yeah.
Commissioner Clayton,
Abstain.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubis, Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Mayor Boland.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, PZ 26-23.
Mr. Chair, I'll read that one and then the next one that's also the same proposal.
Yeah.
PZ 26-23, Fisher and Frickel Custom Homes LLC, care of Chris Against 695 Trade Center Boulevard, Suite 200, Chesterfield, Missouri 63005. A request for the modification of the Town Center Regulating Plan for a tract of land that is currently designated by it as a workplace district to the neighborhood general district to accommodate its use for up to 34 single-family detached dwellings on individual lots with associated street and pedestrian networks, required public spaces, and stormwater management facilities, all in association with an 8.34 acre tract of land that is located on the northeast corner of State Route 100 and 109. St. Louis County locator numbers 23V140245, 23V140218, 23V140162, and 23V140227. Street addresses 17100, 17130, and 17150 Taylor Road, and 2346 State Route 109. Amended C8 Planned Commercial District and NU Non-Urban Residence District, Ward 5, and PZ 27 and 28-23 Fisher and Fritzl Custom Homes LLC, care of Chris Against 695 Trade Center Boulevard, Suite 200, Chesterfield, Missouri 63005. A request for a change in zoning for a total of 4 properties which are currently designated either amended C8 Planned Commercial District, street addresses 17100 and 17130 Taylor Road, and 2346 State Route 109. St. Louis County locator numbers 23V140245, 23V140218, and 23V140227, and/or NU Non-Urban Residence District, street address 17150 Taylor Road, St. Louis County locator number 23V140162, to the R4 7,500 square foot residence district with the Planned Residential Development Overlay District, PRD, such being in association with an overall tract of land that is 8.34 acres in size and located at the northeast corner of State Routes 100 and 109, west side of Taylor Road, formerly Atherton Road. Proposed use, a maximum of 34 single-family detached dwellings on individual lots with associated street and pedestrian networks, required public spaces, and stormwater management facilities, Ward 5.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vernich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department has prepared for your consideration tonight its information report with recommendation relating to the 3 requests Mr. Newberry just read into tonight's record. I think it's important to note that the department is recommending approval of the 3 requests based upon the set of conditions that are identified in attachment B of said report. First and foremost, in terms of the regulating plan change, the department would note that this particular property has a lengthy history. St. Louis County zoned it back in the middle part of the 1980s to accommodate commercial utilization. At that time, the intersection at Route 100 and Route 109, along with many of the surrounding properties in each of the 4 quadrants, was very different. The owner, St. Luke's Hospital, intended to develop some type of medical facility, including an urgent care center. At one point, there was discussions between St. Louis County and St. Luke's Hospital about doing a surgery center at the location as well. Ultimately, as everyone knows, nothing has developed on the property despite its ownership by St. Luke's Hospital and the growth of urgent care facilities and surgery centers across the region. One instance occurred most recently that, for all intents and purposes from the Department of Planning's perspective, for the most part, included any consideration of this as a commercial site. And as you know, several years ago, Route 109 and Route 100 were upgraded with a series of roundabouts. As part of that upgrade of the roundabout system at the interchange, access to this property from Route 109 became almost untenable, meaning that given how the layout of improvements was made, the grades associated with the same, that access from this site to Route 109 would not be feasible. Given that, now alternative access is Taylor Road Extension, or as some still call it, Atherton Road. The department cannot support bringing commercial traffic either through the villages at Brightleaf or from Route 109 in front of the Sandalwood Condominium, Hickory Manor Estates, Sandalwood Condominiums, and a portion of the villages at Brightleaf. That is its only true access, and any commercial type of activity on that property would be an introduction of commercial traffic in an established residential area. Given that circumstance, the department is supporting the change to the regulating plan to accommodate residential use on this 8+ acre site. The petitioner has requested the R4 7,500 square foot resident district, and that is consistent with the neighborhood general designation under the regulating plan that has also been requested. That can accommodate up to a maximum of 6 units per acre, approximately. And in this case, the petitioner is proposing over 4 units per acre, 4 units and a decimal. The department notes that it is a dense proposal when you compare it to many of the other locations in the city of Wildwood, particularly the 3 acre area, the 1 acre area density. But in terms of town center, it is accommodated in this single location. Again, town center, the 800 acres that constitutes the special area of the city. In terms of the PRD, the department is supporting that as well, noting that gives the city the authority through the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council to impose conditions to ensure that there is compatibility between the new use of the property and existing uses, and ensure that level of services, whether utilities, roads, or other infrastructure, is commensurate with the density that is being authorized by the city at the conclusion of the process by City Council. Certainly, the department is aware of the sound concerns at a major interchange of Route 100 and Route 109. The department has attended Ward 5 meetings and heard concerns about the loudness of sirens and other certain vehicles as they drive in the vicinity. And from that perspective, the department has met with the petitioner. They have agreed to upgraded building materials, et cetera, on those units that are most impacted by proximity to the 2 roadways. I would suggest that from our analysis of sound on these 2 corridors, Route 109 and Route 100, done by a consulting firm with specialty in noise and noise mitigation, mass is what addresses sound, not necessarily landscaping. And from that perspective, the homes will serve to mitigate some, but not all, the sound generated by this particular project. The department likes to believe that it has addressed these concerns in a reasonable fashion, but still to allow a development to occur on property. The department also has identified certain infrastructure improvements relative to Taylor Road extension and then public space requirements as well. I think a key point in this particular design is the lake. Certainly, as we've worked through the villages at Brightleaf and the escrow process, bioretention basins are not favored, and certainly were never favored by the department, but advocated in many ways by the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. In this case, we have a water feature, which will include a fountain that is surrounded by common ground and pedestrian facilities. So from that perspective, it will have a prominent location at a major interchange in the city, but have a substantial character. I think that will be even better than the tower structure the same petitioner built at Taylor Road Extension and Route 100 as the main entry into the existing villages at Brightleaf. Stormwater management is a key component. All stormwater will not cross Taylor Road Extension and is contained on this particular site. With concerns about use of the existing detention or retention basins in the villages at Brightleaf have been addressed. Department has restricted construction access to Taylor Road Extension from Route 109, so no construction traffic should be through the villages at Brightleaf. And it certainly is an enforcement issue as well as signage, but the intent is to address as best as we can this consideration that comes forward in many of these types of situations. Obviously, the town center plan is intended to create a community of, let's say, higher density housing along with commercial and institutional services for residents. And in this particular instance, the department believes that this particular project is a mirror of Village E and the villages at Brightleaf. And that particular village was very successful. I believe it turned out in a nice manner. and expect nothing less here. So tonight, the department is recommending the regulating plan change, the change in zoning, and the application of the overlay district. There are a couple of items that the department erroneously added to the report relative to access. I identified 2 curb cuts. There's actually 3. My apologies. It was a mistake on my part. And then we are working on the porch issue and its depth and the extent. And I believe we've addressed it as we did with the Village E at the Villages at Brightleaf. But I may have an alteration or 2 as we move forward if there is a favorable action tonight when you see the draft letter of recommendation. And with that, the department will conclude its presentation. It's available for any questions or comments. Certainly, thank you again for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Questions from the commission? Commissioner Rubis?
I see those, it'll be as similar to those constructed in Village E with the comment that was made tonight. Are these all going to be single level homes or is there any 2-story homes?
There is a 2-story home in Village E, and the representative for Fisher Frictal says that there may be some in this particular instance as well.
So that would be the potential buyer would have to select which elevation they want to put. It's not their plan to put them in.
Well, Fisher Frictal will manage what lot is most suitable for a 2-story and ensure that it's compatible with the streetscape and the character of the surrounding units. And certainly the Architectural Review Board or this Planning and Zoning Commission as part of the site development plan will have a role. But you can restrict it to a 1-story as a part of the recommendation if the commission should choose.
Would that be in our purview or would that be with the site development plan or architectural review if there is still one?
I would recommend you do it now as part of any favorable action, if such is planned, to ensure that as part of the conditions, a clear message is sent on the height of any building.
Okay, and the second question is let me come back to it, forget it.
Commissioner Helfrey?
Mr. Vunich, how are you going to address the road improvements between 109 coming up past those condos and that cute little house on the side and to get into this neighborhood? What's going to happen to that road? And then as regarding the sound, you said that matter is really which would stop the mass. But I didn't do very good in science class. But when we did this stuff with the Hidden Valley, one of the big concerns was about sound. And at that time, that the gentleman that came and spoke with us all about sound said that some plants, like if you had the tall grasses that had the individual leaves and stuff, that those things can break up sound as well. So is there a way that when they do their landscaping development that you could kind of guide them on what kind of plants so that it did help to break up in addition to the homes, the sound?
Certainly, there's a gentleman that we use to do the sound analysis of the 2 corridors, Dr. Thunder out of Northern Illinois. I can certainly ask him if there are any suggestions he would have in terms of not only the building materials and the best applications, but anything else that can be done. I would suggest that in conversations with Fisher Frictal, they are also proposing berms. Again, mass is the key. What we've been told time and time again by Dr. Thunder is berms and walls make the best because they have mass and they're solid, whereas trees don't necessarily achieve the same goal, particularly in the fall if they lose their leaves through the winter and early spring.
Mayor Bullen? Oh, do you have more, Commissioner Helfrey?
No, I just was waiting for the road part.
So
sorry.
Obviously, the recommendation before you and the condition associated with the same is that Fisher Frictal match the road component that was built as part of Village E of the Villages of Brightleaf. Sandalwood Creek and Hickory Manor Estates have done certain road improvements as well. There is a gap from Route 109 as you head south on Taylor Road extension to the subject site. The intent in discussions with Fisher Frickel was that we would use potentially TGA traffic generation assessment fees to complete the whole road to a town center standard. That way, we would guarantee a full 2 lanes of width, pedestrian facilities, and a safe driving surface.
Would that also give a turn lane into the condos and any neighborhoods that access that off of that road? And you said that you had the conversation. So Mike, I guess my question is, will it for sure be done if they build?
Well, in this particular instance, Fisher Frickel has asked for a development agreement. He's had conversations with the city attorney. So in the traffic generation assessment fee requirement, section 5 or something like that of the conditions, a development agreement would be established, and that would specify the obligations of the developer and the obligations of the city, and ultimately be acted upon by city council. So yes, we could include all of those components.
Thank you so much.
All right, Mayor Bullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Relative to the 2-story issue, Joe, directly across the street, Highway 109 to the west, and essentially similar distance from 109, the development, the name escapes me, but they're all
Yes, Windsor Crest
Windsor
is,
Crest thing.
they
So-
have,
There are some ranches in there as a point of order.
there are, yes, primarily they're 2-story, pardon me. 2 stories, but there are a few ranches that have
Thank you.
been built.
There was one comment about the taking out of the boulevard, I guess, on that middle street. Was that done by chance to widen the streets a little bit to accommodate parking or bigger lots?
Well, the original design submitted by Fisher Frickel that the department reviewed long before any public hearing was scheduled, actually had the interior street and had homes racked fronts toward the interior street, which meant the rear yard areas would be facing out toward Taylor Road Extension. And the department suggested to Fisher Frickel that that would not be a very good design unless there's a consistent fence, or in terms of just decks and what people put on them and the things they do in their backyard. It's too important of a street for town center to have it to chance. So to the benefit of Fisher Frickel, they reorientated the design so that it's consistent with what you see in Village E, more so the sides of the home and not the rear yard areas. Thank you. So as you can see, they match up pretty well side to side, and that pattern continues forward and mirrors, for the most part, what's in Sandalwood Creek condominiums as well.
Yeah, and these lots are essentially the same size as
Yes.
Village E.
I can tell you that I went through the ordinance that we did for villages at Brightleaf, Village E, and for the most part, reviewed it and used the same dimensions in terms of widths, depths, and sizes.
All right. Commissioner Clayton.
I'd like to make a motion to.
All right.
Make a motion that we approve as recommended.
All right, motion by Commissioner Clayton. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Rubis. Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubis,
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles votes yes, Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Chair Beatty,
Yes.
and Mayor Boland.
Abstain.
All right, motion we only need 5 on this, correct? All right.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, let's see here. PZ 12-19.
PZ 12-19, Zachary Pilgrim, pardon me, 4733 Fox Creek Road, Wildwood, Missouri, 63069, care of Power Home Solar, 209 Hughes Lane, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301.
Thank you, Mr. Vinich. Mr. Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, this item as well as the next one relate to solar panel requests for conditional use permits that were begun in this instance in 2019. The petitioner at the time did not proceed forward through the process but also did not withdraw the request formally. So the department's just trying to clean up the not ready for action items since conditional use permits for solar panels are no longer required in the code. And in this instance, ground mounted are not allowed under the current code, and is just requesting a motion for this item to be removed from the commission's agenda.
Right? Can I get a motion? Commissioner Clayton?
I'll make a motion to remove as recommended.
All right.
What I would suggest is we do them separately, but we could do it by voice vote.
Okay.
Second it.
All right. So seconded by Commissioner Helfrey and Commissioner Rubis. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right. Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda, PZ 22-21.
PZ 22-21, Fenric Polgar, 1770 Hornbeam Drive, Wildwood, Missouri, 63005, care of Sun Pro Solar, 22171 MCH Road, Manville, Louisiana, 70471.
All right. Commissioner, Mr. Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department doesn't have anything additional unless
right.
the commission has any questions. Again, asking for a motion, second and voice vote to remove this item from the agenda.
All right. Commissioner
Make a
Clayton.
motion to remove as recommended.
Second by Commissioner Helfrey. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? All right. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this was the shortest agenda we've had in a while. Motion to adjourn.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I could make one comment, if you were to ask Mr. Young and I about, was it a short agenda to prepare, the marijuana regulations really taxed.
I can imagine. Yeah. All for something that just grows wild around here.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Helfrey, second by Commissioner Rubis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All any opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you.